Real quick before we get started, I just wanted to apologize for the buzzing in advance. I am having ground issues with my interface and did not have a backup with me. Sorry in advance. Thank you.
Okay, so first off, I'd like to welcome anyone listening to the first ever podcast episode of Building the Broken Podcast. My name is Chris, and today I'll be sitting here with my pastor and my girlfriend's father, Mr. James Potter.
Good morning. Good morning.
So, yeah. With this, when I first got started, and I was going to do video today, but I know the church and your office is kind of under construction, so we're going to stick with just audio.
Alright.
But, when I started this, I wanted to kind of do my first few episodes with people that have influenced my walk with faith a little bit. And it's no coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. I met Brittany right about the time I was getting back heavily involved with my faith. And then, shortly after that was when you started preaching, and, she was leading worship at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is no coincidence. God is like, hey, go meet this family. And, shortly after, I started attending church here, and yeah, the rest is history. I'm here every weekend I can be. But you being obviously my pastor, you're someone that plays a very big role in my walk with faith. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about your faith, life, and just things like that today, and kind of hear how things have gone for you and your opinions on some stuff. So,
well, fire away. I have opinions for whatever they're worth.
So, I know you used to work blue collar jobs, and your dad was a musician and stuff. So how did you end up with the call to preach and all that? I think I remember after I stopped being the youth leader there, I was looking on my shelf in my house and realized the high school Bible I got as a graduation present
Yeah.
still in the box.
Oh.
And so like I think the last probably a year or so before I met Brittany was when I actually started like diving in, read. And that Bible sat in a box for so long, you know, opening it at the time I was opening it twice a day, knocking out a chapter.
Yeah.
I got all along the seams are busted now because it just sat collecting dust for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And now I keep that Bible on my desk in my studio room because, well, to be honest, it's just a reminder that, you know, you open that new one up now or it's going to look like
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah, I have it's not in here, I have a newer Bible now with really large print. But, I don't know, I've had a few Bibles. My mom and dad were Christians, but not practicing Christians. You know, through the entertainment industry. My dad's family was extremely devoutly religious, and my mom's family was Baptist and Methodist. And I've been to the Methodist church quite a bit. But I forgot where I was going with that. Family is deeply important in our faith.
oh, for sure. I know you and me have talked in the past about like my parents were kind of the same. Like they believed in God. My dad grew up Catholic, and my mom like identified as a Christian, but I don't even think she got baptized or anything until she was like well into her 30s.
Makes me remember my mom would not let us get baptized until we were in our teens, and we knew that what we were getting baptized for, because she didn't want us, getting baptized at 4 or 5 years old and we don't, And so in her thoughts, where we were getting really being baptized. But
Yeah, my little nephew just got baptized about a year and a half ago, and he was like 9 years old. And my sister initially, because he walked away from them and went to their pastor, and was like, "Hey, I want to get baptized."
well, that's cool.
And he was like,
That's
I'm not discussing it with y'all.
Yeah.
And so the pastor was talking to him, and she was like, well, maybe you want to wait until you're older. 'Cause I don't want you to feel like you need to do this now because you've seen people do it.
Yeah.
And their pastor and like one of my cousins even told her, she's like, no, like, don't keep children away from God. If they want to do it now, like, go for it. Because like my family, I watched my cousins get baptized, and I remember watching my older cousin Brandon get baptized when he was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old. I'm a little kid, and I'm like, why do they got him? And they went to one of the churches where you got the baptismal robe, and like, why is he wearing a white sheet?
My sister and me, we were baptized in the disciples of Christ. That's what they do. They put you in a white sheet and dunk you.
But I was like, why is he wearing a bed sheet up there in that hot tub? That's weird. Like when I went to church as a little kid, my grandparents were Catholic, so you don't see that in the Catholic church.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, and they went to a huge Catholic church, and my grandpa was a sit at the back type, so you didn't see much of nothing.
Yeah.
But so he got baptized. I'm like, cool. And I'm like, what is that? And then when I was like 16 years old, like 14 or 15, I'd been going to church with my grandparents every week, mostly because my grandpa bought me something after Mass.
Well,
So,
whatever.
like I had these toys when I was a kid called Beyblades, and
Yep.
I had a whole collection of Beyblades due to going to church
You
every
just
Sunday.
don't know. We have still finding those starters. It's for Beyblades. Yeah, I know Beyblades.
But my dad, he was a truck driver, and I went on the road with him to go help him, like, cause he unloaded feed for the company. So his back was hurting, so he's like, "Hey, cool, you're gonna come unload feed your personal agenda.
It's all and a lot of times it's just not even. It's just a difference, a little bit of opinion difference. Really tiny to some people and larger to others. But and that's the Christian faith. And we're close to the Catholic Church, Methodist, but I mean we don't stand up and kneel so much, and we don't have the authority
guy. He must really not like him. And then it turns out he was referring to himself the whole time.
Oh,
But it was him and a couple others, like these older, especially the older pastors. You know, when they get down and dirty with it,
yeah.
it's that. I think of it kind of like when a priest in the Catholic Church wants to get real with that necktie comes off real quick, and it's like, all right, here's the real deal.
Well, people, when they find out that I'm a pastor, it's funny how their language all of a sudden changes, and I wasn't any different. But that reminded me of, my dad was a musician, a traveling musician. He was in Hank Thompson's band, and they were the #1 country and western band in the country. And one of the fiddle players, when you're in a group like that, a group of men, you get extremely close, and you know everybody extremely well, especially back then, because they were all together, the whole band on one bus, with all of their equipment. And on one gig, the fiddle player, Merle David, he was a faithful man. He was a Christian, but he was playing in the country band, and he would drink and stuff every once in a while, but he was still a Christian and a practicing Christian. And they still talk they wanted. Well, they pulled a trick on him one time. It was one of their buddies. He was a high-ranking judge in one of the towns, but he got a shirt and a collar, and they had it planned where they would be outside the bus talking, and one of the people would just be cussing like a sailor, and that's what they did. And so this judge comes around with his white collar on and black shirt, and I think it was Tommy D, the drummer, just started going off, and Merle David is looking at that, and he's trying to tell Tommy D quiet down without without the preacher seeing him or the priest seeing him, and he's just getting nervous as all get out. And finally, he goes, I can tell he's a priest. Let me finish my story. And he almost melted down. Then they all just started busting up laughing, and he didn't think that was too funny afterwards to pick on him for that. But people do all the time. Like I said, I can hear it, and sometimes one guy in particular, sitting where you're at, I was counseling, and he kept apologizing because he would drop off, a cuss word here and there. I said, listen to me, asswipe. I have been in construction my whole life. I have heard those words, so don't worry about it. And he lightened up after that, and he continued telling the story, trying to be as clean as he could. But it's funny, and so for me, sometimes I'll drop a bomb, and that kind of loosens them up, and say, oh, okay, maybe he's a real guy. I can talk to this guy.
Yeah, like I always felt like when I'm talking to especially people that aren't churchgoers, and like people that I have a couple friends that are like agnostic atheists, and they're like they like talk to me at the church when they're kind of feeling the call, and I said, if you feel like talking to me about it, that means God's called you. You should just go.
Yeah.
And one of my buddies, and it's one of the reasons, like me and him used to have a podcast together, and I quit doing it for a multitude of reasons, but I was trying to clean up my language purely for my own, because I don't want to be that guy, F this, F that constantly.
I understand.
And I would be doing really good, then we'd record an episode and get on a tangent about something crazy, and then we had to do a disclaimer at the beginning of every episode, because I was like, I can't, if I just throw a beep in over every word, there's going to be like whole minute phrases of beep. And, but like, he'll get to talk to me about it, and he's like, he goes, I go to church, and he's like, everybody's all talking like proper, and I said, you need to hang out with some real Christians. I said, because one of the most real things I've ever heard from a fellow Christian, and one of the days I was kind of just going through some stuff, and I don't know, I can't you this big, burly, strong guy, right? I was like, well, I mean, yeah. And he goes, he didn't make you to be a whining bitch and little girl. So get up, trust him. He's got it. He'll get you through it. And I don't know if it motivated me but it made me just break my little fit and laugh. And like my buddy, like I'll tell him that he goes, well, you talk to me that way, but like I don't think other church people will. I'm like, you would be surprised. Told him, I said, when you're ready, I'll send you on a walk, and you're gonna meet some real Christians. Like I remember some of the people on mine. We had one of the guys who's a felon that was working the walk. One of the other older guys that was working it had arrested him.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
And it was like, you know, they serve in the Emmaus community together now. And
that's hilarious. You know, I was working a walk. The last walk that I worked, there was actually a guy that was wanted on felonies on that walk. He was a pilgrim on that walk, and we found out on that walk. I was actually a table leader, and he was on my table, and you know things were coming out, and so he was also talking to one of the pastors there, you know, about things that he had done, and I mean he was really convicted, and so they actually got him, and it was like a conference call. They called the sheriff's department and said, okay, look, you know, this guy's here. He is on, you know, this walk to Emmaus, and he would like to turn himself in, but he would like to finish this walk first, if that was possible. And, you know, they him on around and said, okay, yeah, we'll let him finish, but, you know, we're going to pick him up right when it's over. And they picked him up right when it was over. But it was cool that he got that to go through that experience anyway, because man, he was at very first he was freaking out. You could tell, I mean, something was wrong. He was like somebody on the run, you know, and hiding. It really felt like that. And then by the end, by Sunday, he was confident and ready to go. So even though he knew he was going to jail and probably for a long time.
yeah, you know, I didn't expect the level of like realism when I went, or like people just laying it out there. And one of the guys at my table, he just straight up told me, he's like, I gotta be real, guys, I'm only about 5 days clean off cocaine. And I was like, and of course, with my past with substances and all that, the first couple days was like, hey, are you good? And not even like a spiritual way, like you're not having withdrawals or anything right now.
Schizo.
And I mean, he held it together. He actually, I think it was on Sunday morning, you know, 'cause we all, your table sits together for every meal. We were talking at breakfast, and he said, man, Thursday night, if my phone would have worked, I'd have called to get a ride out of this place. But he goes, now I don't want to go. He goes, because may seem cowardly to some people, whatever. I just, if
No, not really, because an interview is one thing. You can interview somebody, just like we are across the table from, even if you have opposing views. But giving somebody a platform is different. And yeah, you're right. I mean, somebody, yeah, I'll do it, and then all they want to do is they say the same thing over and over and over. Where you'll have different questions, and
Right.
it doesn't matter what question you ask, they keep coming up with the same answer. It's not an answer to your question. It's just whatever they want to spew. Hey, we're gonna squeak a minute. Can't help it.
yeah, that's a like now. I do love talking to agnostic people because and my friend who is, he gets so mad when I say this. I tell him agnostic people are Christians with commitment issues.
Yeah.
Because you meet them, they're like, I believe there's a God. I just don't know what that God is. And then they say, oh well, yeah, everything in the Ten Commandments is legit. You shouldn't kill. You shouldn't steal. You should respect your parents. And I'm like, so you hold on to our values. You believe there's a God.
Yep.
It's like you just don't want to commit to it. And but like I'm always like I love talking to them because especially for them people, like you can, if you talk to them about Christ from a much more realistic, like down to earth point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a couple friends at work that one of those, like, I mean, she doesn't like argue about the church thing, Christian thing, so no, she believes in God, but doesn't care for the religion thing.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't mind like when you bring it up because you're like kind of down to earth about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, like I'm not. I know
They
people think.
they don't want someone preaching at them, saying that you're stupid because you don't believe.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, because when they think of talking about God, they think of pastors and some guy standing up behind the pulpit. I'm like, but even now, I mean, of course, you think of like TV pastors a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's what the issue is, and those guys are.
That is a big issue.
Those guys are up there. They're pointing their finger, and you can't go to heaven unless you send me $19.95 a month.
Yeah. So I can buy my new jet. I'm gonna keep the old one, but I need another $4.5 million. I'm gonna get this new nicer jet. We're
God,
gonna do missions out of that jet.
God put it on my heart to buy a new Rolls Royce this week.
Yeah.
And who can we deny what God wants, or how can we deny what God wants?
I seriously have a problem with that. I've read Billy Graham. He preached all those years, and his ministry raised billions of dollars. He made $100,000 a year,
Yeah.
and of course his organization paid all his travel and stuff. But he made $100,000 a year. That's what. Then he lived on that, and he had a regular house like regular people, and
Didn't have
he would fill up
Osteen Manor.
stadiums and preach to 100,000 people at a time. That's why he was so successful for so long, because it wasn't about him. He preached the word, and it was the fact that you could actually hear the word coming from a regular guy. He may get loud, and may get excited sometimes, but that was Billy Graham. You listen to his message, and it was always sound, always.
Yeah, that's what out of all the like TV pastors and evangelists and stuff, like I don't ever hear people saying bad things about Billy Graham.
Yeah.
I actually seen a clip from another podcast, and they were talking to this pastor, and he was reading a deal where somebody that Billy Graham, they kind of preached a little differently and didn't always see eye to eye, but they had met several times. But because they disagreed on some things, they asked this guy, well, do you think when you die you're going to see Billy Graham there? The guy was like, no. And the guy was like, whoa, hang on. about, he told his pastor, he goes, why do I need this Jesus thing? I was a good person before. He goes, I didn't ever intend to harm anybody, and he said, unless I had to. And his pastor was like, man, you had gun charges. You intended to harm somebody. And the guy's like he's a pastor now, actually, but he said his pastor told him, he's like, Proverbs 3:5, trust not your own heart. He's like, remember, trusting your heart, you thought you were a good guy, you were doing, drugs and all this, and that's when I was struggling in my faith when I was younger. I remember being like, I don't have to go to church, I don't do all this, like, I'm a good person without it. And I'd say that as I, killed, a case of alcohol and smoking God knows what back then, and I'm like, but I'm a good person without it, and.
But you know what? You were a good person.
Like,
the alcohol and whatever you were smoking didn't make you a different person. Well, it does change some people's,
well, it made me make a lot more poor choices.
Well, it will do that, but that didn't make you a bad person. People, say, "Oh man, I drink, I'm terrible." Well, no, not really.
Well, like, I'm not even saying that made me like terrible or anything, but it's one of those, the same mindset that led me to do all that back then was the same mindset that was like, oh, I'm good without, I'm good without this whole Bible thing. I don't need that. And the way he kind of described it, that his pastor said to him was like, you need to know what's okay. He says, pick this book up, this Bible. Tell you if you're right or wrong, Yeah.
There's no blurry lines.
That was
I'm trying to make it stop.
Well, come on.
But like, that's what I started reading that, and I was like, okay, there's got to be some more gems in here. And as I went through most of the Proverbs, and I was I think I actually, then after that, I started with like Mark or Luke, one of the two. I started reading through those, and I remember I was about halfway through Mark, and I was like, well, this is, at one point I said, this is the only faith thing I've really looked into. And I knew some people that got into the Norse pagan thing, so I ordered the Have 'Em All off Amazon.
What's the happening?
It's not really like the Viking Bible, but it's like a compilation of like wisdom from Odin, and it's like there's a lot of gems in there, like not trust a drunken person. I can't remember. There was some like good bits of wisdom in there. Nothing really like religious in it though. But I was reading it and I'm like, there's some wisdom in here, but I'm like, it just doesn't hit like that does, I've seen people that tried to read the Quran to see how like Muslims get their ideology from, and they're like, I'm reading the words on the paper, but I don't feel those words.
Well, with those words, jump back on the Muslim thing. So the Quran has been compromised, I guess is the best way to say it, because the original text has been burned. The Quran,
you got to remember, David brought like 5 stones because he was ready to take on Goliath's brothers too.
Yeah.
And that's how a warrior thinks, not a little boy that tends to sheep,
Yeah.
And like we think about Jesus as this little frail man on the cross.
Yeah.
But Jesus was a carpenter, and carpenters, especially back then, I mean, even nowadays when it's fake wood and stuff, they're big, strong guys.
Well, a carpenter back then also had to be familiar with block and everything.
Yeah.
Because if he was going to do a job, he may have to, set block and then put wood on top of it to make a structure. And that was part of it.
And even like in the temple when Jesus was flipping tables, think about tables back then, or old like birch wood, probably a tabletop good 2 or 3 inches thick, probably weighed a good 200 or 300 pounds. So if he's flipping them tables, that's like strongman competitor activity.
Yep.
Like Jesus was not this little frail man.
He wasn't raised up in a Pharisee house, spoiled. You're right, by servants and stuff. He carpenter's son, raised up in the carpentry. You're right. A lot of times the carpenters, they even had to go cut their own wood. So he'd have to go out, and probably when he was younger, I mean, if it were me, if I were Joseph and I needed that tree cut down and I've got a 17-year-old right here, hey, Jesus, would you grab that saw and go cut me that tree and bring it back out, So he's probably raised as a hoss.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I remember working on things with my dad, and he was always, he's like, hey, Junior, hey, go move that for me.
Yeah.
Or he'd be working on a truck, and he had like these old heavy toolboxes, and he finally, once I moved out, he got toolboxes on wheels.
Yeah.
But hey, go bring that toolbox over, and I'll be over here, like
Straining, but it builds you up. When I was a tile man's helper coming up, I was a hoss. I've weighed 235 pounds before recent, like last year, and I lost a whole bunch of weight.
yeah.
I had weighed 235 before, but I was all muscle because I was a tile man's helper, and tile was heavy. We didn't have dollies. We had wheelbarrows. We didn't have dollies, so most of the time we would carry 80-pound boxes of quarry around, taking them to the tile man on our shoulder, have shoulder problems. But then we would mix mud. There would be a 6-yard dump of sand they would bring out to the job, and we would get a pallet full of Portland cement, and then a mixer right in front of that. Well, I would have to shovel sand in the mixer all day and cement and mix the mud. Or if I wasn't the mixer, then I'd had to haul those 300, 400-pound wheelbarrows in, with the mud and give it to the guys that were floating the floor. So that kind of work, I was really built up. And all of the helpers back then, it didn't matter the trade, whatever, the helpers were always, because they were carrying everything. We didn't have all the wheels and stuff they have now. And I can just imagine, like I said, Jesus back then, being his dad's helper, being a carpenter, well, yeah, he was probably a great carpenter, but at first he was probably a muscle-bound helper, carrying everything around. So he knew what it's like to serve, he knew what it was like to help, and he knew what it was like to work his way up to being a master or whatever of his job.
Yeah, and that's what, I guess they kind of like overly, I guess, I don't know if we'll call it sissified, but like overly sensitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the best way to describe it is like at Walk to Emmaus, like the song you sing at candlelight and whatnot. Like the women's walk, I'm sure it's Jesus,
Yeah.
very pretty. But the men's walk, it's a bunch of monotone men. It sounds almost like a war chant.
Yeah.
And I love that,
Yeah, I do. I love the energy in the men's walks, and I'm sure the women love the energy in the women's walks. They probably relate, but I agree with you there.
I mean, that's the good thing. It's kind of like having different men and women's groups. LGBTQ and all that. And I laughed so hard because went to, posted that episode on Spotify, went to go share it on Facebook that night, and then went to go share it to my personal page. It was like, cannot share, can't share, can't share. I called people, hey, can you go on our podcast page and try to like or comment? It wouldn't let people like or comment on it.
Yeah.
And the next episode did the same thing on Facebook, and I'm surprised our Facebook page didn't get shut down, because then I started closing out every episode basically making fun of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
But we got all these platforms where people can show basically pornography publicly, but how dare you call them out on that?
But you can't talk about people coming into our country illegally.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You can't mention that, but you're right. You can talk do pornography all day long. That's all right.
Like I was scrolling through Instagram the other day. I don't get on there very often. I started Instagram back when I was a musician, and because everybody was starting to go to Instagram, and I thought, well, I need one to promote my music. I was a solo artist then, and I think I've posted on Instagram in the 9 years that I've had one, like 9 times.
No.
The first 5 were in the first year.
I post on Instagram and it's always promoting something else from YouTube or whatever. That's the only time I
But
use Instagram.
I was on there, and I'll be just scrolling through like the shorts, reels, whatever the short videos, and there's like a lady blatantly topless, like breastfeeding, and I was like,
Wow.
Okay, I get that y'all maybe aren't censoring that because it's a natural thing, but I'm like, there's too many perverts out here. Like,
women do that in public too, and I'm like, don't quit.
make it a point to like they'll do it at a cigar lounge, and he made it. The guy made a comment. It's like, smoking a cigar, that's not like a cigarette. You puff on it for 5 minutes and it's out. A good cigar might burn for an hour.
Yeah.
And he's like, so if you're talking business, you're talking the Bible, you're committing. So you're gonna have a Bible study while you're all puffing on a cigar. You're committing to spending an hour together in the Word.
That's interesting.
I thought that was a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, yeah, we're sitting over an hour now talking about faith. You can do it without cigars. There's nothing wrong with it, but like,
You can do a cigar.
like board of elders that are just kind of set in their way, and you do need to have the elders people there because they
you need the money for one thing.
you need the money, and they've also been doing this a lot longer than that 25-year-old who's on fire right now.
But they also need to know that just because they have the money, that doesn't mean that they need to be in that great leadership role. God may have provided them the money, and they should give that money, but they should also realize, man, this guy that's 36 years old, he is on fire for God. We need to get him. Well, he's already, leading all of these groups. We need to get him on this council, leading this whole church.
Yeah, that